other stuff that was done downstream away from us.
Around the Osho is where most of the property was purchased, but there was also properties purchased when they redid the bridge. If you remember the Mission Road Bridge, that was the one with all the signs that were along China Mission Parkway, and created a lot of protests and receiving a lot of money that helped them pay for the Mission Road Bridge here. The Mission Road Bridge was important because the old bridge, when the water would rise in Rock Creek, it would actually get 3 or 4 feet deep in water across the top of the bridge. Mike Press, the former county manager, actually rescued people off that bridge in 1977 when he was working for Johnson County MedAct.
The crossing was rebuilt in 2006 and 2007 by Mission Hills. The bridge that was there before was actually about 3 foot lower. At 63rd and Indian Lane is another low water crossing. People come out and actually have to close it. It's either the police department or the maintenance man. That caused poor water to come this way due to this side is actually Mission Hills. This right here is Kansas.
If you look back that direction, you see the houses that are on the hill, and then you look back, a lot of the homes through here were actually built in the channel. If you got out and you looked at where the channel wants to be, the homes were built in the channel. So there was 13 properties that were bought out. There's 40 total that were in the 1% or 100-year floodplain area. So they've purchased about a third of them. This is every 3 or 4 years at SMAC we talk about these homes that are down basically in this creek bottom. There is nothing you can do to alleviate the flooding. And look at where the channel wants to be. It's basically in the yards of a lot of the houses along Brookridge and then back in here. And so what happens is, like I said before, had we been using a 200-foot buffer, most of those would have never been built in that creek bed. So what we're dealing with is really post-construction homes and trying to figure out how you can manage stormwater. They've thought about flood walls. Problem is there's so much water that's coming off Shawnee Mission Parkway, the flood walls actually then create another lake on this side of the flood walls, which then floods houses further up. So the solution for this area is actually removing the homes. There's no stormwater solution that can be found. That is why you hear Fairway saying, Mission, you need to stop the water, because if you stop the water, then we wouldn't flood down here.
We would back there.
And the problem is it's just not Mission. The water in Rock Creek, there's about 25% of it coming from Waddell and Reed or the Breach Academy side into Mission. And so you have to keep working up in the watershed in order to create that. And even when there wasn't developed property, this area flooded. So the problem is, the only solution is actually to move the structures from the floodplain. There's a lot of history related to that site and its flooding. Here's the first thing to remember is that that site always flooded. That is not new to that particular site. When it was rebuilt in 1988, it was constructed so that 50% of the water would go underneath the site and 50% would go through that parking lot on the bottom. If you go back to the 1998 flood pictures, the October 3rd flood of 1998, you can actually see cars that were in that lower deck and how they were moved around, and then the silt that was both inside the car and outside the car in terms of the height of the flood water there at the mall. The water actually got into the mall at that lower level. So, deed in lieu of foreclosure, mall's not making it. Tom Valenti comes to town. The news that I got to give Tom Valenti, if you're buying this, understand that the floodplain maps have just been redrawn, so your entire property's in the floodplain. The way the FEMA flood insurance program works is you're not allowed to make improvements greater than 50% of the value of the property that's in the floodplain or 1% event area. At that time, the mall was worth about $14 million, which meant that the most that he could reinvest in that site was $7 million. use the site as he would want. He said he wanted to redevelop it. That meant that he was going to exceed the 50%. If he's going to exceed the 50%, then you're going to have to alleviate the floodplain. So he removed the mall property. We made the floodway improvements. Those improvements, if you remember, we set up a special assessment district around them so that we can recoup our costs. And in every district that we established, we made sure that the reimbursement of stormwater was at the top of the list in terms of the things that get reimbursed as you're spending money. Oh, not all the cities. I know what ours are. Oh, my guess is along here. Oh, probably.
And then you look at our boxes here, you have 3 boxes on our left. Those are the ones that cross through the gateway site. And they're 14 feet by 11 foot each, 14 feet wide by 11 foot tall. And then you see 2 others on the far side there. Those actually intercept Cooper Creek, which drains out of Roland Park from the north, and they carry the water on the north side of the property down to here. Now the interesting thing about this right here, you see this metal plate bolted to the top of these boxes down here. That actually prevents, believe it or not, that slows the water down enough and backs it up into this pool here to make sure that the peak flow going into Fairway won't increase as a result of any of this construction or redevelopment of the gateway site. So we modeled it like crazy. We modeled it. Fairways engineers have looked at it. They've said it. Yes, it's modeled correctly. Peak flows will not increase in Fairway as a result of all of this development. Before these boxes were built, the floodplain, as Mike was talking about, extended to the buildings that were there all the way over into Johnson Drive. It was actually into Johnson Drive. Now that the boxes are in place, the 1% flow is contained all the way in the 3 boxes here, coming from the west in Rock Creek, and then the 2 boxes on the far side from Roland Park. The gateway, we've been involved in reviewing the gateway plans, and they're right on track to fit their buildings around all of the investment you all have made. So they're going to shoehorn their buildings in there like they need to, and they will leave an overflow path. As we drive by, if you look over there, there's a big concrete structure in the middle of the site. That's actually an overflow, and that will allow, if a 1% flood can always be exceeded. That's the one thing about flood control that you have to keep in mind. There's always a bigger rainstorm out there.
Huh?
Just walk back to City Hall from here.
What did you become fun?
Underground.
Possums.
Okay.
What?
Gateway, the wastewater is talking about improvements to this lift station. Is that? Yeah. So they have some plans to improve that, which could address some of those issues.
Is a short-term solution, which has been done, and that's put riprap on this bank. What you have to be aware of there is that short-term solution.
What do we call this stuff that's in
Gabion baskets.
These are Gabion baskets. So you've seen something that kind of looked like stacked block, but it was actually poured concrete. Then you saw riprap, which is the large stone. Then in Fairway you saw what I would call natural, which is trees falling in the creek.
That's natural.
Then you saw bridges, and all the bridges have been elevated because the flood elevations increased, and have increased over time. John and Justin and I can kind of tell you sort of as this presentation is the last one. And that gives you the most development, redevelopment options as you move forward. It also alleviates street flooding But you have to make sure you carry those improvements all the way to the west. And that includes the Johnson Drive interceptor, it includes enlarged boxes on Bartway.
It's kind of slow down in there one time.
Boy Scout? Yeah. Listen to it.